the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, it's Spencer here with the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Welcome back. This is going to be episode 30. And in addition, I also have Perrin with me. So Perrin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. How's it going, everybody?
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is going to be a regular occurrence. Everybody seemed to enjoy having you as a co-host, and I know it makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more natural for me to have somebody to ask questions and respond to and have a discussion with. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. I had a lot of fun too.
Absolutely. And today is going to be another podcast that reviews one of my recent blog posts. But this one will be a really good audio podcast, I think, because we're going to be able to dive in deeper to a lot of the topic, more so than I was able to do on my blog. And the topic of today's podcast is 9 common mistakes to avoid for SEO and niche sites.
Yeah.
And really with anything, one of the best ways to learn is through experience rather than just watching somebody do it or read about it. And this is very true of SEO and niche sites as well. That's how I learned all along, is through doing. And so when I go over these 9 common mistakes, these are all mistakes that I made and that I had to learn through experience. Mm-hmm. But hopefully by going over these today, people listening won't have to go through each of these mistakes on their own to learn. They can learn through my experience and your experience, and hopefully be a little bit ahead of the game as they go and start building out their niche sites.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something we've talked about before and something I've told my brother a lot since, I'm kind of mentoring him through the niche site building process, is that I feel like the only distinctly different thing about my mindset or any entrepreneur's mindset and say the typical 9 to 5 mindset is that we are willing to fail as many times as it takes to succeed, and I think it's a really important part of the process. And I found myself saying that sort of thing a lot in the comments, so I think this would be a really good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, because there is going to be a lot of meat, and I don't know exactly where this is going to go because, as you mentioned, there's already a lot of blog comments on this post, and so we may end up spending some time there as well.
Yep.
But really, first and most importantly, the most common mistake that I see people make in SEO and building niche sites is poor keyword research. And I've said this many, many times, but this happens so much. People send me emails and say, hey, I've had this site for 6 months, and for whatever reason, I just cannot get it to rank. And I have to be the bearer of bad news many times to say that, you know what, you picked a keyword that is just impossible to rank for.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, it's nearly impossible because of the competition, because of other people that have bigger budgets. They're going to be able to outrank you. And so that is by far the number one mistake that people make, is picking keywords that are too difficult to rank for.
And I think, and not to sort of shamelessly plug our product, but I see that most often with people who don't own Longtail Pro. And that's, and that's not to say that you absolutely need Longtail Pro to do keyword research. It makes it a lot easier. But even if you don't have it, you need to be able to know how difficult a keyword is before you really start putting in, 60, 80, 100 hours. So there are a lot of tools out there to do that. But at the very least, you should know the page authority of all the people in the top 10.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously that was a lesson that I learned, and it was a huge mental shift in my career, really, because I did go after these huge keywords when I first got started. I had a couple of blogs that I don't talk about a lot because, well, they failed and didn't go anywhere for a couple of years, that I was in the finance industry and credit repair and going after all these things that no way was I going to rank for, but I didn't understand that. until I finally created a small niche site and it ranked well, and kind of the rest is history. But because of that mental shift, I actually created Longtail Pro for that very reason, because it became so vivid to me how important keyword research was that I needed a tool. I wanted to create a tool that was better than what was already out there. But like you said, there's lots of other tools, lots of other ways. As long as people are doing that research, that competitor analysis, and this could be an entire podcast all on its own, what to look at. You mentioned a couple of those, but people need to be looking at the first page results in Google, determining where is their weakness and can I outrank those existing sites. And a lot of times it comes from picking a keyword that maybe doesn't get searched for each month as much. Instead of picking something that gets searched for 100,000 times a month, that if you rank number one in Google, you're going to be rich. You're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And going after that keyword, you need to be realistic and maybe pick a keyword that only gets searched 5,000 times a month, but because it gets searched for less, it very possibly has much less competition, and therefore you're likely to make some money rather than no money with this huge keyword. So I don't know. I can't drill this home enough for people out there that doing proper keyword research is the most important part when you're getting started, because you can't change the keyword that you picked down the road 6 months or a year, or it's incredibly difficult to do so anyways. So people need to get that right.
Yeah, and I think it's also one of the most difficult things to learn if you are new to SEO. So if you are new, I think it's one of those things where you need to be asking people who kind of know what they're doing what your keyword looks like before you start investing tons of time and money into a site. Because you and I have both heard those stories where people say, I have my first site and I wrote X many pages of content and I spent, X dollars on it and it just wasn't ranking. And then I found out that it was a really competitive keyword. So if you are going to be asking for mentorship on any part of the process, I think keyword research should definitely be it.
Yep. And tied with that keyword research is a sub point of that. And a mistake that people make is not picking a good market to go into. And so very similar to keyword, but a market overall, if you go into a market where there aren't any buyers, or pick a keyword that is not commercial in nature, it's very hard to make money with that keyword. So even though you might pick something that's very low competition and gets searched for enough times every month to make it worth it, if nobody's buying anything, if there's no advertisers there, there's no repeat buyers, if you don't have a healthy market there, it can't be a money-making venture. And so that's another thing, that even if they get that first part where they analyze the competition, they got a great keyword in the ranking, and then they come later to find out, well, there's nobody spending money, on how to do whatever, some informational keyword. So that's a very important point to make as well.
Yeah, and I think A Penny Shaved is a good example of a happy surprise where, we picked a keyword that we thought looked okay, and it turns out that shaving is just a great market to be in right now. But for a lot of these, there's going to be some indicators, but you just kind of have to go with your gut. Like you obviously want to check the advertiser competition for any keyword and make sure that it's high and that there are at least advertisers spending there. But you also want to go with your gut. Is it something that people enjoy spending money on? Is it an established market that has proven to be profitable for a long time? And ask yourself those types of questions, I think.
And again, it's something that we could dive into very, very deep. How do you pick a good market and what is a good market? And maybe we'll do that in the future, actually. But one of those initial indicators is the advertiser competition that you mentioned. You can find that in the Google Keyword Planner, or in Longtail Pro or other keyword research tools. You want to have high advertiser competition because that means there's lots of advertisers there, and likely there's going to be people spending money in that market.
Yep.
So moving on to point 2 here, for a common mistake that people make when building niche sites is spammy link building. Now, back in 2009, 2010, there was all sorts of tactics that worked really well. But if you're still using those tactics, you're really shooting yourself in the foot because Google's evolved. There's been the Penguin update, Panda update, other updates, and Google is always changing. And so you can't be doing things that worked a few years ago because that's seen as more spammy or shady link building practices. Google really can detect when automated or unnatural link building practices are at play, and they will penalize your site. And so in my post here, I mentioned just a few link building methods that might be seen as spammy. Now, there's probably, well, I know that there's lots more, but these will just give you a flavor of what I'm talking about. So if you're using any kind of automated software, you might be at risk of spammy link building. If you're doing any kind of large-scale article marketing, large-scale blog commenting, leaving lots of weak forum signatures on various forums, if you're creating thin profile pages on forums or other types of sites, that might be seen as spammy. It is spammy. If you're using lots of very weak directory links, if you're using press releases with keyword anchor text, or you're linking from pages that have hundreds of links to other websites, that's probably a spammy page, or really anything else that on a large scale is coming from weak sources or is automated. Those are the types of things that really everybody should know by now are seen as spammy.
Yeah, and it's tempting. Like
Absolutely.
it's tempting to, and I've done it. I've bought automated software and tried it. Because it's really tempting to be able to push a button and make money. But I think common sense should be telling you, and it was even telling me when I was doing it, was that nothing is ever going to be that easy. You're always going to have to put in a little bit of work. So don't be tempted by these sorts of tactics because, one, it's never that easy, and it's probably too good to be true. And also, other methods of link building are better. If I had to choose between one powerful link and 1,000 blog comments, I would go with that one powerful link every time.
Mm-hmm. And you have to think about the long term. What might get you to rank today might be what causes your site to get penalized tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it's better to take a long-term approach in SEO. Also part of this spammy link building is the overuse of keyword anchor text. And that's been talked about a lot in relation to the Penguin update. But basically, even if you are avoiding all spammy link sources, if you're overusing your keyword within your anchor text, you could still be getting yourself penalized by doing that. So if you're trying to rank for the keyword best leather wallets and 20 or 30 or 50% of your anchor text is best leather wallets, Google's probably going to see that as a red flag. And so, going forward, I don't really have a magic number exactly for how much anchor text to use, but certainly less than 10% is what I recommend, and even less than 5% most of the time is what we try to do when we're building out our niche sites. Mm-hmm. Instead, people should be using variation of different keyword phrases. So maybe a longer phrase that has some of the keywords in it, but some not, or some of the words are not keyword related. URL, anchor text, brand name, no anchor text with random phrases, things like that. It looks a lot more natural. Hopefully you can get some natural links as well. But if you're out, commenting at different places, don't shoot yourself in the foot and always use the exact same anchor text. So anything you want to add there? Otherwise, we're going to move on to point 3.
Only that it might pay to look at a couple established sites that have natural profiles and see what their anchor text percentages look like using Majestic SEO or Ahrefs to give you a good idea of what a good natural profile looks like, and then try to emulate that, or even do some white hat stuff to produce it.
Yeah, great points. Very good point. Always do competitor analysis, see what's working for other people, and see if you can implement that with your own site. So point 3 is over optimization. This really has become a big deal. I've always said that you should try to be using your keyword less than about 1% of the time on your site. So within your articles, within the content. Unfortunately, I still see a lot of people that use their keywords 5% or more within their articles, and that really is a big red flag for Google as well. In addition, to really see how over-optimized your site is on page, you need to look at not just what's used in your articles, the keyword in your article, but also site title, domain name, category titles, tag pages, everywhere that you're using keywords within your site. You need to aggregate that all together to see how optimized you really are. So even if you're using your keyword less than 1% of time in your article, if you combine your site as a whole, you really could be over optimized. And also, the other thing that you should be looking at that to make sure that you're not over optimized is the anchor text off page. So if you're using your keyword phrase in lots of your anchor text and you're using it on page a lot, when you combine that, Google can see all of that, and we believe that they combine that in some sort of formula, and that could result in a penalty as well.
And we don't know the exact formula, but something we've been learning is that it's some sort of like a multiplying factor. So if you do by accident or something end up using a lot of anchor text, you can help reduce that by reducing your on-page anchor text too. But you need to be aware of the whole big picture for sure.
In addition, if you want some more information on over-optimization, Hayden Miyamoto actually wrote a really great blog post on his site nohatseo.com, and I've had Hayden, of course, on the podcast a few times. And so you can go over to nohatseo.com and just do a search for over-optimization. It's a blog post titled, I think, The Ultimate Guide to Over-Optimization in 2014 or something like that. Has some great tips there that you can get some more in-depth information. So now the fourth point for common mistakes that people do when they're trying to perform SEO or build niche sites is poorly written content. If your content sounds like crap, then Google isn't going to rank it. They just aren't going to do it. And this is something that most people listening probably know already. They've internalized this, but it still is a mistake. And in particular, with newer people that maybe are trying to take shortcuts. They think that they can outsource something for really cheap, put it up on their website, and then use some great link building to make that content rank. Well, even if you're getting great links, that can help, and maybe for a short period of time you can get up on the first page. But because of metrics like bounce rate and time on site and other things that maybe Google is looking at, they can detect when actual human visitors think that that content isn't very high quality. In addition, Google actually does utilize manual reviewers to spot check sites, and they have guidelines that they follow. And so they'll look at a site, and if it doesn't read properly, doesn't have good grammar, and for other reasons doesn't make sense, really isn't on topic, things of that nature, they're going to flag that. And it's not to say that you have to be a great poet or a great author. You don't have to have this huge research paper for every article that you write, but there's just some minimal thresholds that you have to pass when you're writing your content. I mean, everybody knows, if you read my blog, I mean, it's full of, punctuation errors and spelling errors and everything like that. But by and large, my content on nichepursuits.com is quality. I'm, producing actionable content, things that people want to read, and they stick around and do read that. So you need to find that happy medium there between, content that is well researched and good, but you don't have to kill yourself with perfection as well.
Yeah, and I feel really strongly about this one, mostly because my whole background is in writing and communication. And I've spent a career before I started working for Niche Pursuits, developing content that really did stuff and affected people in the real world. And I've had this conversation with a lot of our colleagues because we work with people who, are successful and stuff, who pay for really cheap content, and I've never thought that that was the optimal way to go. And I kind of think about it like this, like what you want to happen is for a user to see your site in Google, to click through, to have a great time reading it, or at least to find something that they're looking for specifically. Best case scenario, you want to leave an impression so that they remember you and come back. But also you want to drive them to action. And you can't do that if you're paying for cheap content. So we really pay a premium for content, and we pay it directly to writers so that they're making good money. But we do it because, we're investing up front in a site that's going to make us much more than that down the road. So when you look at the lifespan of a site and how much money that's going to make you as long as it's active, it's not a very big investment at all to pay the extra dollar for someone who's college educated, speaks good English, can write in their own voice, and can do a little bit of research to put together a good article.
Yeah, and I will add to that point as well, in the fact that when I first got started many years ago, I fell into that same trap of hiring cheap content writers and thinking I could just put something up that was good enough and that was sufficient. But I have, over the years, slowly evolved to, you know what, if I'm going to put a website out there, why don't I make it the best quality website that is on this subject possible? And that truly is what Perrin and I strive to do now when we build our sites. We don't just try to use SEO tactics, if you will, to rank better. We really do try to do some research and provide those shopping comparison charts and write really great content that is interesting, useful, and is what the human reader is looking for. So I can't stress this point enough. You need to write quality content.
Yeah,
you just need to do it.
We even go as far as trying to hire one writer per site so that every site has its own unique personal voice. Because that, if you ever did have a site that took off and you wanted to expand to a business, that's a critical part of it.
It sure is, and actually that's what we're going to talk about next. That is point number 5. Well, point number 5 is not enough content on your sites and not scaling your site when you see some success. And this is something that we've been talking a lot about recently, Perrin and I, in our business here. But here's the main point is, when you have a site and it starts to have some success, you really should expand that and try to capture more traffic with more content. We have found that once a site starts ranking for its primary or secondary keywords, the best way to scale that is not trying to move your primary keyword from position 2 to position 1 necessarily, but to write more content and rank for lots more long tail keywords. And so that's a mistake that people often make, is they are ranking for 1 or 2 great keywords, but they're missing out on this huge other opportunity that if they added 20 or 30 or 100 articles to their website, they could quadruple the earnings of the site. And in my original niche site project, I was showing charts of how many long tail keywords I was getting traffic from. And near its peak, it was something like 1,800, almost 2,000 different keywords that my site was getting traffic from. And so it's not just one keyword that you should be looking at. You should be trying to capture much more, and you can do that with more content.
Yeah, and I think a penny shaved is a good case study too. I mean, after the site had a nice earning month, I reinvested some of that money into about 20 more articles, and that resulted in a traffic increase of about 700 or 800 people a day. and an earnings increase of about $1,000 a month. So I think a good way to think about it is if you have a site that's earning money, you have two choices if you want to keep doing SEO. You can either build a new site or you can add to the one that's already working. If you build a new site, you're starting from scratch, and you not only have to add content, but you have to build new links. But if you expand on a site that's already working, all you have to do is add content because you know Google already likes the site and you already have links supporting that domain. So that's not to say that you shouldn't build new sites. It's just a case for investing in the sites that you know already work.
Yep, and tied with this point actually is not just adding new content, but trying to figure out how you can scale the business even bigger. And that might be through creating your own product, whether that's an informational product or creating a physical product, or seeing how you can shift your business from maybe an affiliate business to being a true business owner that is selling something on your website. And, this is something that, to be honest, I really haven't done very much with my niche sites. I'm trying to think. I do have one ebook that I sell on one of my niche sites. I think that might be it,
Yeah.
for a small niche site that actually sells its own product. All the rest, I'm really just in the business of creating niche sites, and that's kind of what I do. But there could be opportunities, maybe like a Penny Shaved, that you could come out with some sort of shaving related product and take your earnings from X to Y, and that being, or X to 2X, I should say, or something of that nature.
Yeah, Douglas Smythe, who we had on the podcast a while back, who owns howtogrowmustache.com, is the best example I know of this, where he first scaled by adding tons and tons of content and got up to where he, I think he gets like 2,500 people a day. And his next step for that site was to create a physical product and sell it. And he's doing a great job and having lots of success. So you can if you want to.
Fully. And, I suspect that most people listening, that's maybe the best way to go for them, to be honest. Not everybody is like me in the business of, really, I'm in the business of creating lots of niche websites. Maybe I'm creating less of those than I used to. But for most people, one or two sites is probably all that they can handle. And they're going to be able to scale that business the best by coming up with their own product, or certainly at least creating lots more content on that website.
Right.
So, okay, let's go to point 6. And this one is one that I do see a lot. People get antsy. They'll email me. They'll comment on my blog. They'll say, why isn't my site ranking? It's been 3 months and it's still, on page 10, it's nowhere. So point 6 is lack of patience. When I first started building websites several years ago, you could get to the top of Google within 30 to 60 days, no problem. That's how it worked. Google would rank things very quickly. But really, those days are gone. SEO requires patience. And a new niche site can now take up to about 6 months before it cracks the first page of Google. And Perrin and I are going through this in our business right now. We have sites that are they're not quite 6 months old, but 5 months old or so. And they're just now starting to crack the first page of Google for the primary keywords. And in fact, just yesterday, 2 of them kind of for the first time just hit that first page on Google. And these are sites that we've done a ton to. Tons of link building, all the right things, but it just takes some time.
Yep.
And that can be hard to watch, to sit back and think, boy, I've spent 3 months, I'm not ranking anywhere, I'm going to give up, I'm going to try something else. Well, it could just be the case that nowadays it takes a little longer. You need to have that patience and just wait for that time to pass.
Yeah, and you can build that into the process, like for my second site, I kind of spread everything out that I needed to do, content and link building, over 30 or 45 days. And then I just let the site sit there, and it slowly rose up the ranks. And I think it's also worth mentioning here that what we're seeing and what we've kind of learned from Hayden Miyamoto is that there appears to be like a sandbox is what people are calling it in Google now, where they will, if a page gets a couple links really fast, they'll bump it up to the second or third page, see what the bounce rate is, and other on-page metrics that they measure. And if it doesn't sort of pass the test, then it'll drop to page 8 or 9 or even 500 plus for like a month or two before it sort of gives it another chance and comes back up. And that has happened to almost all the sites that we've built. So that can scare a lot of people, but it seems to be just what Google is doing now.
Yeah, it is. And the tough thing about Google is you never know when they change things. Nobody knows their exact formula. And so just the best word of advice is just to have some patience. Just do everything that you know you're supposed to be doing, creating that quality content and hopefully acquiring some great links. And eventually your site will be rewarded. But we are seeing after about 5 or 6 months, usually is when the more significant movement starts to take place. Okay, point 7 here is worrying too much about the small stuff. There's a lot of perfectionists out there, and definitely there's a lot of people when they're building their first site, they just don't know exactly what they should be looking out for. So they're worrying about everything. They're worrying about what's the perfect theme for this site? What's the exact plugins that I should have? How should I configure these plugins? Am I doing it exactly like Spencer said on nichepursuits.com? Am I doing it exactly like so-and-so wants me to do it? All of these things, and we could probably go through dozens of different little small things that people worry about that prevents them from taking action.
Yep.
So that really is just my recommendation is stop worrying about the small stuff and just start taking action. Certainly worry about your keyword research and picking a great market and writing great content and all those other things that we said. But all these other things like themes and how your site looks and, are you showing your full article on your homepage or just, a snippet of that article, all these things you can change. It really is not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And having talked to many Niche Pursuits readers now, I would say analysis paralysis is a big problem,
Yeah.
And my advice to the people who get analysis paralysis is to realize that there are 2, maybe 3 things that make a niche site successful. One, and this may not even be a thing because I've seen it, not matter for some sites, is that, make a site that looks decent. I like to make my sites look really good because I might want to make a brand out of it, but just make sure it looks decent. And the other 2 are just add great content and get good links. How you go about those things, a lot of times just doesn't matter. Just do those 2 things and make it happen.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So hopefully that helps people listening, that maybe are struggling with some small things to just take the action, go and do it. And, most of the things are things that you can fix later down the road. All right, point 8 here is copying others. Now, this one's kind of a tricky one, and hopefully I make the point that I was trying to make here, because I will be the first to admit that I've gone out, done keyword research, and I see the keywords that other people maybe are ranking for, and they're having success, and so I copy their keywords, meaning, I'll target the exact same keywords because it sparks an idea of something that maybe I didn't think of on my own. So there's really nothing wrong with that. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. There's nothing wrong from learning a couple of things from other successful people or other successful sites. But the point is that a lot of people get stuck in the trap of copying exactly what somebody else is doing. And I don't mean copied content per se, but trying to follow the exact strategy, not thinking outside the box, not doing anything original on your own. Because a big part of success in SEO and in life really is trying to be unique, trying to do something that makes you stand out from the crowd. And if you do that, your site gets noticed, your site gets linked to because you did something different. Or if you get stuck in the rut of trying to copy somebody that you think is successful, maybe you're copying everything that Pat Flynn does over at smartpassiveincome.com, and you could be missing out on opportunities in your particular niche or with your particular site that you can see better, than maybe Pat does because he's in a different niche. So I don't know. Am I making sense here, Perrin? I mean, really, you need to focus on how you can be unique, how you can do things differently, and come up with the best strategy for you.
Yeah, and we see this so much. We see exact clones of the niche site projects a lot, and I've even had readers email me distraught saying, I've copied you exactly. I have the same exact theme. My logo looks exactly like yours. I don't know why I'm not having success.
Oh man.
And it's because every keyword is different, every site is different. Even if you copy me directly, your audience is going to be different because they're searching for different things. The people you're going to be able to network with are going to be different. The advertisers looking to spend money in your niche are going to be different. So it's never going to be a matter of just painting by number. And that's not to say that you can't develop your own process and take tactics that work, but I think a really important lesson for a lot of people is that SEO is always an exercise in problem solving and adaptation. And, we have the same basic strategy for all of our sites, but we always tweak and adapt as we go. And, all of our sites look completely different. None of them have the same exact link profiles. None of them have the same theme or any of that, just because, every site is an experiment.
Yeah, it really is. And you need to be willing to shift and adapt as you see changes in the marketplace. So for some of our sites, maybe we see something, maybe our Google Analytics, we get tons of traffic one day from a particular keyword. And we decide, what, this site really deserves a lot more content right now. Let's do it. Which is a decision that we recently talked about for one of my niche sites. We decided let's add 30 articles right now. This site, we think it's at the point where it's going to break big. Let's do it. Whereas other sites that we have, we're not quite sure we want to do that just yet. So every site's different. If you're looking for a blueprint of how to do something exactly, you're not going to find it. And again, the point is you can learn more by being aware of what's going on in the SEO industry, what's going on in your niche, and just being willing to adapt and not worrying so much about what others are doing and trying to copy them. It really gives you more freedom and the ability to hopefully have a more successful business anyways.
Yep.
All right, so the last official point here is point 9, and that is being a loner. So when it comes to SEO, you can't be a loner, unfortunately. Yeah, as much as I do like hanging out by myself, I do like to sit in my home office and work on my computer without any coworkers. It's kind of nice sometimes. But the reality is that with bigger sites and with SEO in general, you really do need to reach out and network a little bit. For example, nichepursuits.com has grown in part because of the relationships that I built with other bloggers and other podcasters. And they've linked to my site and mentioned me because of things that I've done here or because I reached out to them. And in turn, those links have made Google pay attention to my site, rank it well for lots of long tail keywords. Also, the same can be said for Longtail Pro. If I tried to do everything on my own without networking and reaching out to others a little bit, that business just wouldn't be where it is today at all. So SEO really is at its core a social venture. That's, the huge backbone of Google is the linking structure, the backlinks coming. And those are just a vote of a social nature saying, hey, I like this guy, go check out his stuff. Here's this guy I know that writes about this topic. He's knowledgeable. You should go read about it. So SEO really is at its core a social venture. You can't sit on your own, be a loner. The best links are going to come when you get out and do a little bit of legwork on your own.
Yeah, I would say that, as I transitioned my career to focus solely on SEO, the two best things that happened to me were obviously developing a friendship and a professional relationship with you, and then also becoming friends with a bunch of other guys, like Doug Cunningham, Dan Thompson. I play video games with Hayden Miyamoto every once in a while, and like those are really valuable relationships because, first of all, you learn a ton by just talking to other people who are in your industry. I'm not going to have all the best ideas. That's not, I think that's obvious that no single person is going to develop the best strategies. By just chatting with people, you learn a ton and you come up with a lot of great ideas. But even further than that, you get direct benefits to your sites that can be really profitable. I currently pool my resources, some of them with some other people, and we have a group PBN, which is just vastly bigger than I could ever build on my own. And I know a couple Niche Pursuits readers have done the same thing, where they have sort of pooled their resources and developed a much more powerful link building process than any one of them could have developed on their own. And so, there's a social benefit and there's sort of a mental benefit and a strategy benefit, but there's also direct resource benefits to just making friends with people who are doing the same thing.
Yep, excellent points. Really good points. So those are the 9 core points, the mistakes that I mentioned in my blog posts. So those are the 9 common mistakes that people should be avoiding when they're doing SEO and building niche sites. However, at the time of recording this podcast, this blog post has 85 comments, it looks like right now.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were really, really good.
Yeah, some really great ones.
And so we wanted to cover a couple of those. A couple of people suggested, points 11 or points 10 and 11 that should be added to the list. And I thought I should mention those. Let's see if I can find those. If you find those before me, Perrin.
Yeah, I think Alistair had some good ones. Alistair Cochran.
Yeah.
So shout out to him. And he talked a little bit about the analysis paralysis and not taking action. But the point that he made that I liked the most was that a lot of people get into SEO because they think it's free. And they want to make a lot of money, but they don't want to invest any money of their own. And I think that's a really good point. What do you think about that one?
It is a really good point. I'm glad you reminded me of that one. He puts it really good here. So I'm going to just read one line from his comment here. He said, point 11 here, he said, "You want untold riches, but you're not prepared to spend more than $10 to get it." Mm-hmm. That basically says it right there. And then he goes on to say, but you'll spend $200 for an ebook to learn how to do it.
Right.
Which really is kind of funny, sad because it's true.
Yeah.
People spend a lot of money on training and courses and programs, but they're unwilling to spend $50 to outsource an article or spend it somewhere else that could benefit their business. So, and we're not talking about a ton of money here.
Right.
But I was guilty of the same thing when I first got started. I tried to do everything on my own, write every single article, build every single link, build every single site. And it became this unwieldy beast, this huge project that I just couldn't get very many things done, particularly because I was working a full-time job and I just didn't have the time. And I really can draw a direct correlation between when I finally decided to start outsourcing a lot of the content writing and other aspects of website building, things that freed up my time, when I became willing to spend some money. And it was really, only a few $100s that my business grew. I was able to build more sites, get more done, and the profits increased from there. So
yeah, totally. And I think spending money, especially if you are a new entrepreneur, spending money is scary, and I totally get that. But I feel like it might help to look at it a little bit differently, almost like you would look at, playing the odds at a casino or something. Say you're new and you have read everything on Niche Pursuits and maybe some other SEO blogs, and you want to start building sites. And say you have a $700 budget for your sites, which is really good. That's a pretty substantial budget. You can make a good site on that. Even if your success rate is 25% and you build 4 sites, you spend $700 on each one, which would be just over $2,000, and only one succeeds, over the course of the next year, you should make your money back easily and then some. Plus, you will have learned a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to increase your success rate and build more successful sites. So, it's not only a monetary investment that's going to get you a direct return on that money, but also you're learning a whole bunch of skills along the way.
Very great points. And, I agree 100%. And I still echo that very strongly in my own business. Perrin, you obviously know what I'm spending on my business. I'm investing heavily in buying domains, in building out a PBN, building out niche sites, expanding those sites with new content. I've learned that really the way to get there, you need to invest some money to grow and expand that business. And no, we're not seeing the immediate returns. I don't expect to see a lot of that return for 6 months or more as we build out those sites. But I know that down the road, the returns should be exponential based on, the investment that I made.
Yeah, even if our success rate is 50%, we're going to see a really great return on the investment for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So that was one of the great points. There was a lot of other great points. Just trying to see if there's any other comments that I wanted to read. There really is a lot. Was there any others that you thought were particularly good?
Yeah.
Or other points here?
Yeah, one brief one to touch on. My brother made a good one, which is worrying too much about competition. Because as my brother started building his first site, we had probably 5 conversations where he was like, there's so many niche sites in there, like, look at all my competition, and he was just freaking out over it. And it took about 5 separate conversations to sort of convince him that, other niche sites in any market are a really good thing, especially if they're ranked at the very top of Google. Because Google likes those sites, Google is happy to rank affiliate niche sites, and it's a much safer bet than if you were to go see no niche sites in the SERPs.
It is a really great point, and I'm glad he mentioned that on the blog post and that you brought that up, because that is a point I see a lot of people worrying about is, oh no, there's 3 other niche sites ranking in the top 10 already. This is stacked competition. How can I possibly, be the 4th niche site and expect to make any money? But to be honest, one of the number one things that we look at now in our business when analyzing competition, when Perrin and I sit down and look at keywords, one of the number one things that we want to see is other niche sites in the top 10 of Google.
Yeah.
For the very reason that Perrin just mentioned there. But it's sort of when we see that criteria met, that, hey, there's 1 or 2 other niche sites there, that usually pushes us over the top and says, all right, if they can do it, we know that Google's ranking those types of sites, and there's no reason that we can't be right there right along with them and possibly even beat them. So it's actually, a competitor analysis point that we like to see now.
Yeah, it's like when Burger King builds a McDonald's, or Burger King builds across the street from a McDonald's. They know that area works. And Hayden has he says, I forget if it's in his blog post or maybe something he just said to me one time, but he said to imitate your competition on page and to obliterate them off page. So that's what we look for. We look for sites that we can imitate on page that Google already likes, and then we just trounce them with off page SEO and building really powerful links and stuff. So competition is really definitely a good thing. And the reality is, if you and I both build a site targeting the same primary keyword and you're number 2 and I'm number 3, it doesn't matter that much, because almost all the traffic is coming from thousands of different long tails anyway. So it just really isn't a productive way to think about it.
Overall, all of these individual points that we're making, we could probably do an entire podcast on each of them. And so if anybody listening in found any of the points that we were making interesting and wanted more information, want us to do something more in depth, let us know. Go over to nichepursuits.com and leave a comment on either this blog post or any blog post, and let us know what you want to hear about. But overall, that's what we wanted to cover here. Hopefully, by mentioning these 9 common mistakes that people really should be avoiding when doing SEO and niche sites will help those that are listening avoid those mistakes, that they can go in and build their first successful niche site or be successful on their second or third try or however many sites that they've built, and hopefully can internalize these and find success down the road. Today I don't have any new documentaries or new books to share. I'm still reading the books, so no new book recommendations. But I will hopefully be done with one by next week. We'll see how close I get. But overall, that's it. If you've enjoyed this podcast or other podcasts, I would love to hear from you and would enjoy seeing a review or rating on iTunes. You can do that at nichepursuits.com/iTunes. That, of course, lets me know what your feedback is, and then also lets Apple know that there's value in this podcast, and so that they can know how to rank it properly. So thank you again for listening to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Have a great day.